this time.
Start chanting.
Yes. Yes.
นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอาเสวนาจะพาลานังปันติตานันจะเสวนาบูชาจะปูชนียานังเอตัมมังคลมุตปฏิรูปเทสวาโสจะปุเพจะกตปุญญาตาอัตตสัมมาปณิทิจะเอตัมมังคลมุตตมังพาหุสัจจันจะสิปัญจวินโยจะสุสีขิโตสุภาสิตาจยาวาจาเอตัมมังคลมุตตมังมาตาปิตุอุปัฏฐานังปุตตะคาราสสังอนาคุลาจะกัมมันตาเอตัมมังคลมุตตมัฏฐานันจะธรรมจริยาจะยาตกานันจะสังฆโหอนวัชชานิมานิเอตัมมังคลมุตตมังอารติวิรติปาปามัชฌปานาจะสัญญโมอาปมาจะธรรมเมสุเอตัมมังคลมุตตมังพระโวจะนิวาโตจะสันตุจิจะกตัญญูตากาเลนะธรรมสวนังเอตัมมังคลมุตตมังติจะโสวจะสตาสมนานันจะทัสนังกาเลนะธรรมสากาชาเอคลมุตตมัตตโพจะพรหมจริยัญจะอริยสัจจานัทธัสสนังนิพพานัสสะจิกิริยาจะเอคลมุตตมังพุทธัสสะโลกธรรมเมหิจิตัญญาสนกัมปฏิอโศกังวิรชังเขมังเอตัมมังคลมุตตเอตาทิสานิกตวานาสาภาธรรมปราชิตาสาภาทโสชิงคาชันติตันเตสังมัคคลมุตตมันติ
Sống hoàn toàn yên lặng là
Thank you.
lớn nhất. Ai sống được như thế đi đâu cũng yên lặng tới đâu hạnh phúc thật.
Chưa gì.
Na mô Thượng Diệu Pháp Ba Điện Dạng Kiếp Năng Tao Ngộ Ngã Kim Kiến Văn Đất Thọ Trì Nguyện dạy như lai chân thì nghĩa Nam Mô Bát Nhã Hội Thượng Phật Bồ Tát. Nam Mô Bát Nhã Hội Thượng Phật Bồ Tát. Nam Mô Bát Nhã Hội Thượng Phật Bồ Tát. Ma Bát Nhã Ba La Mật Đa Tâm Kinh Quang Tự Tại Bồ Tát. Thâm Bát Nhã Ba La Mật Đa Thời Chiếu Kiến Ngũ Quẩn Giai Công Độ Nhất Thi Khổ Anh Xa Đời Tân. Vì không công bất vì sắc sắc tức thị không công, tức thị sanh tỏ tượng hành, thức diệt phục như thị. Lời tự thị chư pháp không tướng, bất sanh bất diệt, bất câu bất tịnh, bất tăng bất giảm, thị có không trung. Sắc vô thọ tượng hành, thức vô nhãn nhĩ tí, thì không ấy vô sắc thanh đơn vị xúc pháp. Giới này chi vô ý thức, giới vô vô minh diệt, vô vô minh tận, đại chi vô lão từ diệt, vô lão tử tận, vô đạo vô trí diệt, vô đắc dị, vô sở đắc, vô bồ đề tác đói bán nhã ba la mật đa, cố tâm vô quái ngại, vô quái ngại, vô khủng bố huyền lý điên đạo mộng tượng, cố canh niết bàn tam thế chư Phật nghi bát nhã ba la. Đa cố đắc a nâu đa la tam miệu tam bồ đề, cố tri bát nhã ba la mật đa, thì đại thần chú đại minh chú, thị vô thượng chú, thị vô đẳng đẳng chú, đẳng trừ nhân ti khổ chân thiệt bất hư. Thuyên bát nhã ba la mật đa chú, tân thiết chú, quyên yết đế ba la, yết đế ba la, tăng yết đế bồ đề tác bà, yết đế ba la, yết đế ba la, tăng yết đế bồ đề tác bà, yết đế ba la, đề ba la, tăng yết đế bồ đề tăng bà.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Is that all? So today is the second day of our teaching taking place. Regarding, I am a practitioner of the teaching of the Buddha, a follower of the Buddha, a monk, follower of the Buddha, following the Mulasarvastivada Vinaya tradition, which was introduced to Tibet, in Tibet by the great Abbot Chandrakshita. So this Mulasarvastivada tradition, and then there is in China the Dharmagupta tradition, which spread in China. So there are these different Vinaya monastic lineage. So there are minor differences, but the major precepts of the monastics are same. The four, what are known as the four parajikas and so forth. So a follower, a monk follower and practitioner of the teaching of the Buddha, myself, and then you who are traditional Buddhists, mainly you, and then there may be other people who are also interested in listening to the teaching. So I'm doing an introductory teaching of the Buddha, introduction to the Buddha. And as far as I'm concerned, this is my contribution or service to the teaching of the Buddha. The teaching of the Buddha teaches us that we need to discipline our mind, tame our mind. So this is the Buddha's main precept to us. So I also feel that this is that the different religious traditions in general are meant for emotional or mental hygiene, whereas regarding physical hygiene, there is so much advancements in medical treatments and so forth in the world, but to have a healthy mind, it cannot be done with external medical treatments, but we need to change our way of thinking in order to do that. And so all the religious traditions of the world have the same message to this end. There are differences in their techniques. For example, the theistic religious traditions say that all of us are creation of God, and therefore according to them, we need to pray to God and try to find a means to tame our mind through that. Whereas in India, even before the Buddha came, there was already the tradition of learning about our psychology, mind and emotions for over 3,000, since around 3,000 years. So there has been this tradition. In other words, the practice of non-violence or non-harming. And the main factor for that as the compassion or karuna. So these were already there in India for the last over 3,000 years. And then the Buddha followed this tradition that has come down to him and then practiced also karuna or compassion. And on top of that, when he found his disciples, more and more disciples, then according to their mental dispositions, their interest and nature, the Buddha gave teachings. So within his teaching, there are teachings for the Shravakas, Pratyeka Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas. So these are divisions on the basis of the mental dispositions of his disciples. So at that time, there was no talk about Hinayana, Mahayana as such, but the terms Shravakayana, Pratyeka Buddhayana, Bodhisattvayana were there. So the Buddha's teaching has a detailed means of how means to tame the mind. So the Buddha's teaching was given in accordance with the mental dispositions of the Buddha. And so therefore Buddha's teaching, there is difference. The Buddha's teaching is different from others on the basis of its philosophical assertions. So I am a follower of the teaching of the Buddha in general, and particularly the glorious Nalanda tradition. So this tradition, the Nalanda tradition, emphasizes the importance of using logic and reasoning and to investigate into the teaching. And masters like Nagarjuna and so forth emphasized using logic, epistemology, to investigate into the teaching of the Buddha. And similarly, Dignaga and Dharmakirti did that. So to transform our minds through the teaching of the Buddha, we need to use our intelligence, our critical faculty. So this is a unique feature of the teaching of the Buddha. And I studied the writings of Master Nagarjuna and then reflect on their meaning and meditate on them. And so there are different techniques within the teaching of the Buddha, although it is the teaching as a whole is meant for transforming our mind. So here, those who are traditional Buddhists, it is not a talk about conversion here for you. But in the West, because they have their own traditional religious traditions, so therefore we need to be careful about converting people or propagating the teaching of the Buddha. For example, in the Buddhist countries, when other people from other religious traditions come and try to spread their religion, we would feel uncomfortable, wouldn't we? And similarly, in the other countries where they have their own traditional religions, which also teach love, compassion, tolerance, self-discipline, contentment, and therefore we need to respect them. And especially these days, these religious traditions, it is very important for the religious traditions to be in harmony with one another. So on the basis of difference in the name of religion, difference in the religions, it is sad and unfortunate to fight and kill one another. All religions teach love and compassion, whereas this is the case. If we actually use the religion as a means to defeat the other and victory for oneself, it is sad. And therefore, it is important for all of us to be harmonious. So here we are all traditionally Buddhists, traditional followers of Buddhism. So I'm very happy to have this opportunity to give this teaching. And so we'll have an explanation of the 37 practices of the Bodhisattvas and the three principal aspects. But first I would like to give a general overview. So all of us, the Chinese Buddhists, the Japanese, Korean, Vietnamese, so most of us recite the Heart Sutra, the essence of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. So in this, the Buddha says the 5 aggregates also should be viewed as lacking inherent existence. And so this word also doesn't seem to be there in Chinese. So I actually asked someone who knew Sanskrit to check what the Sanskrit says. And so the Sanskrit also has the word also. And so this has its own significance. So this word also in this statement, the 5 aggregates also are empty of inherent existence. So regarding that, during the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, the Buddha seems to be teaching selflessness. So selflessness of persons is taught there, whereas in the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, not only the selflessness of persons, but also the selflessness of phenomena is taught. And so, with regard to the selflessness of phenomena, the basis for the designation of a person, the aggregates are said to be empty. So His Holiness are inquiring the Vietnamese whether in their Heart Sutra this word also is there or not. So the first turning of the wheel of Dharma emphasizes the selflessness of persons, whereas the second turning, not only that, but even the aggregates, the five psychophysical constituents are said to be empty of inherent existence. These psychophysical constituents are the basis for the designation of a person. So just as a person should be viewed as empty of any inherent existence, likewise the aggregates, the five aggregates, should also be viewed as empty of inherent existence. And on top of that, so the word also has the significance of indicating that not only the person but the psychophysical aggregates, the basis for the designation of a person, are also as without any independent self. So this is what I found when I inquired Sanskrit, someone who knew Sanskrit, to find whether the word also is there in the Sanskrit or not. And so the Chinese, those reciting the Heart Sutra in Chinese, Vietnamese, Korean, and Vietnamese, and so forth, should also check whether the word also is there in your translation of this Heart Sutra. If it's not there, you should. It would be good to include it in the Heart Sutra. So I just wish to say that. And then, whatever religion people may be following, if you follow your own traditional religion, it would be beneficial because of the habit that you have developed over the centuries. It would be beneficial to follow the traditional religion. So with regard to Buddhism, we follow the Nalanda Tradition. So in our tradition, we follow the Vinaya practice of the monastic discipline, and then on top of that, in the Nalanda tradition, we use logic to. So the usage of terms Hinayana and Mahayana are not so good, and therefore I prefer to use the Pali and Sanskrit traditions. So, of course, these words, Mahayana, Hinayana, are found in our scriptures, but the term Hinayana seems to have a connotation of an inferiority or something, and therefore I prefer to use the terms Pali and Sanskrit traditions of Buddhism. And so we are followers of the teaching of the Buddha, and then particularly the followers of the Sanskrit tradition reciting the Heart Sutra. So what more can I say? So the Four Noble Truths the Buddha taught teaches true cessation, which in the second turning of the wheel, we investigate into this true cessation through reason. And therefore, the teachings of the perfection of wisdom is very important. And as it is mentioned in Maitreya's Mahayana Uttara Tantra, which says that we have this Buddha nature within ourselves, whereas the exaggerated outlooks on things are adventitious. So the Tathagata Garbha is something that is within us. And on the basis of understanding the Tathagata Garbha, it is said that the stains that are within us are temporary, adventitious, whereas we have the potential for all the qualities that we can develop, the Buddha qualities that we can develop, so which is there innately. And this is the naturally abiding Tathagata Garbha, or the potential. So what obstructs us from to attain omniscience is that of the cognitive obscurations, which is the latent potencies left by the destructive emotions. And it is said that this obscuration to knowledge can be overcome because there are those of the antidotes to that. And then in the Heart Sutra, it is mentioned that the Buddhas of the three times, past, present, Buddha, future, become enlightened based on dependence on this on the emptiness. So the past Buddhas became enlightened by realizing this profound emptiness, and the present ones also are becoming enlightened through this. And so the potential that we have will be fully realized when you become a Buddha. So the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, such as the Heart Sutra, there are the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, such as the 100,000 line Paramita Sutra, and so forth. In Tibetan, we usually talk about 17 different Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, which are divided into mother and son, or child. And the shortest one of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras is said to be this letter R. So R is a negation, a letter of negation. So what this signifies is that whatever appears to us do not exist the way they appear. So after having taught the first turning of the wheel of Dharma, and then teaching the true cessation more in greater detail and precise precision, and also those to be abandoned or overcome the true suffering and true origin suffering are taught in detail in this teaching, the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. And therefore, the Heart Sutra says form is empty, emptiness is form, form is not other than emptiness, and emptiness too is not other than form. And so these are meant for overcoming the destructive emotions within us, mental afflictions, and which are rooted finally in this ignorance which holds on to true existence in things. So in accordance with the mental dispositions of his disciples, the Buddha gave different techniques to overcome these different destructive emotions. So there are ways in which he made distinction between these negative emotions, and in the first turning, second turning, and third turning, the wheel of the Dharma. And then in the Tathagata Garbha Sutra, there is a slightly different way of teaching. So this is not something that I made up. So the first turning taught the Four Noble Truths and the 37 aids to enlightenment. And then the second turning, Wheel of Dharma, taught this true cessation and true path in great detail. And then the last turning of the Wheel of Dharma teaches the degree of subtlety within the mind. So the mind, which has the quality of awareness and knowledge, or clarity and knowledge. So I interpret that the Buddha taught this subjective clear light mind in the third turning because he taught the object's clear light, which is emptiness, in the second turning of the Wheel of Dharma. So Gongdang Rinpoche actually makes this he interprets in such a way that the Buddha taught these three turnings of the Wheel of Dharma as a progression, as a means of progress, or showing the difference in the teaching. The third turning is taught, in the third turning, the clear light is taught in order to lead the disciples to Tantra. So the Buddha gave the first teaching of the first turning of the Wheel of Dharma, and then in the second turning of wheel, he taught the sub-object clear light, emptiness, and then in the third turning, the subjective mind clear light, leading the disciples finally to the Tantra. And so there are different ways of interpreting the teaching of the Buddha, even in the Indian tradition. So the writings of Master Nagarjuna and his followers and disciples are the main, shows the main thrust of the teaching of the Buddha, although the teachings of Sangha and his disciples and followers are important. So as I quoted yesterday, also the Master Nagarjuna, Master Chandrakirti says, this suchness just explained in most profound and terrifying yet people with. So verse number 155 of the 11th chapter of Madhyamaka Avatara. So I quoted yesterday, where and then the in the Madhyamaka Avatara Bhashaya, the auto-commentary, Chandrakirti actually says that Vasubandhu and others have actually rejected this. And so the Master Chandrakirti's Madhyamaka Avatara and its auto-commentary are very clear commentaries to Master Nagarjuna's thought. So I read these two texts often. And then there are those of other texts such as Abhisamaya Alamkara and others, Mahayana Sutra Alamkara and others. And so the Tibetan Buddhist tradition follows this tradition of studying the Buddhism comprehensively, not only just a few texts, but we have this broad range of subjects that we study. And so, of course, the teachings are meant for practice and meditation, but in order to be able to meditate, you need to develop the conviction through reflection, and for that to happen, you need to engage in the study of the teaching of the Buddha. Otherwise, without doing any study, it's like a person who wishes to climb a cliff, up a cliff or a rock without having any hands. And so it would be without study to try to climb the teaching, the rock of the teaching of the Buddha is like a person without hands. So Bodhisattva Gyalsey Thokme Sangpo also has a commentary on the Mahayana Uttara Tantra. And it is a great text that he has written, not only using logic, but he also it shows that he is he has done a broad learning. And so Tsongkhapa has said that in the beginning I sought much learning extensively, and in the middle all the teachings dawned to me as personal instruction, and in the end I put them into practice day and night, and in his destiny fulfilled. So I would like to thank you all who have taken interest in listening to my teaching. And this time, so some of our Tibetan scholars are there in the different countries. So I appreciate their effort to teach the people the philosophy, logic, and so forth. So you too, the people in these different Buddhist countries and others, you should not just say, "Oh, I want to meditate," but what we need to do is try to find what disturbs our mind, peace of mind, and what are the different techniques to tackle these disturbing emotions and so forth, and so that we could train our mind, for which masters like Nagarjuna and so forth, their texts are very good. And with regard to the philosophical view, the teachings of Master Nagarjuna and his followers are better than those that are the philosophical assertions found in the teachings of Master Asanga and his followers, because you find logical inconsistencies in them. So with regard to study, there is the Mula Madhyamaka Karika by Nagarjuna in Chinese, and then Madhyamaka Avatara, the Entering the Middle Way, by Chandrakirti, and then Dharmakirti's Pramana Vartika. The second chapter is very important. There are four chapters in this book, which is proving the reliability of the Buddha. And this chapter explicates the salutation verse of Dignaga's Pramana Samuchaya. And so it is very important for you to study these texts. And if you have these texts in Vietnamese, for example, you should study them. If these texts are not there in Vietnamese, you should translate them. And this is my opinion. So let's go through the 37 practices of Bodhisattvas. So I couldn't find from whom I received a teaching on these 37 practices of Bodhisattvas. I don't remember. I tried to look into the notes. So what I remember is the Labdun Rinpoche was someone from whom although I have not received any teachings, but Yongzin Ling Rinpoche received teachings from him, and Labdun Rinpoche had made a print, and he sent a copy for me. And the text that I'm using has its own blessing. So I have actually seen him on a few occasions, although I haven't received teachings from him. So during the final meeting, the last time I saw him, I met him. He told me that, His Holiness, you will live a long life. And he had actually made a statue of Aryatara, white Tara. And he also had a picture of me. And one day he actually had a vision that from the heart of the white Tara, a ray of light is emanated, and it's actually dissolved into my picture, he told me. And so he lived a very old, to a very old age, with gray hair. So he told me that you will live a long life. So I also pray to live a long life. So we are on verse number 24. All suffering is like the death of your child in a dream. Verse number 25. If those who aspire to enlightenment willingly give up their bodies, what need is there to mention external objects? Therefore, with no hope of reward or benefit, to give with generosity is the practice of Bodhisattvas. So, this shows the practice of giving. And then, verse number 26, if lack of discipline prevents you from benefiting others, then your wish to benefit others is just a joke. Therefore, to observe discipline with no longing for worldly existence is the practice of Bodhisattvas. And then the next verse,
the Bodhisattva's practice through which one creates huge merit. For that, we need the practice of patience, and therefore, you need someone, an enemy, to provoke anger in you so that you can practice patience. Therefore, it says, for a bodhisattva who seeks a wealth of virtue, every harm perpetrator is like a precious treasure. Therefore, without feeling irritation to all, to cultivate patience is the practice of a bodhisattva. If Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas who strive for their benefit alone expand effort as if to extinguish a fire burning on their heads, to cultivate joyous effort, the wellspring of positive qualities is the practice of a bodhisattva. Vipassana, perfectly endowed with shamatha, completely conquers all afflictions. Knowing this and to cultivate a meditative concentration that transcends the four formless states is the practice of a bodhisattva. So with regard to the four formless states, transcending the formless states means that you go beyond the state of a mind which you attain at the formless state, the highest formless state, which is the peak of cyclic existence, and develop a mind which realizes emptiness. And next 30. And next verse 31. If you do not analyze your own faults, so people may consider you be a precious or someone holy, and you also feel you are something special. So if you do not analyze your own faults, you might put on a dharmic facade while having and behaving in a non-dharmic way. Therefore, to continually analyze your faults and then discard them is the practice of bodhisattva. If compelled by your own afflictions, you speak of the faults of other bodhisattvas, you yourself will degenerate. Therefore, never citing the faults of those who have entered the Mahayana path is the practice of bodhisattvas. And next verse. So for a practitioner of the Dharma, you should always be gentle in your speech, not use harsh language, and therefore desire for gain. So the verse number 34 says, harsh words disturb the minds of others and disintegrate the bodhisattva practices. Therefore, to give up harsh and unpleasant speech towards others is bodhisattva practice. And then the next verse read. So with regard to the mental afflictions or destructive emotions, for example, if you cultivate love or loving kindness, you'll help to it'll reduce the anger. So by meditating on the repulsive nature of body and so forth, you counter this attachment. The intensity of the attachment is reduced, and through love you reduce the intensity of anger. So just like treating the different sicknesses with different medicines, we also have these different methods to counter the different destructive emotions. Like that, the meditation on the repulsive nature of the body and so forth, countering attachment. So these mental afflictions, attachment, anger, hatred, and so forth, are explained very thoroughly in the Master Nagarjuna's texts. where Master Nagarjuna actually says that our afflictions arise, mental afflictions arise through a mental exaggerated outlook, which in turn are rooted in ignorance. So therefore, as Master Chandrakirti says, that all afflictions arise through this viewing oneself as having some true independent existence. So once you become accustomed to afflictions, they are hard to undermine with antidotes. Therefore, with the remedial weapons of mindfulness introspection, to forcefully eliminate afflictions such as attachment the moment they arise is the practice of a bodhisattva. So you cannot just pray, may these afflictions go away, may these afflictions be pacified, but you need to actually understand how these afflictions arise through grasping at some true inherent existence in things and how to counter that. In brief, wherever you are and whatever you do, always examine the state of your mind. Continuously working for the welfare of others is the practice of a bodhisattvas. So we'll stop here with regard to this text. Let's go to the teaching, the three principal aspects of the path now. So these three principles, the wish to be free from cyclic existence, the spirit of enlightenment, and the correct view, actually summarizes the essence of all the teachings of the Buddha. And so Rinpoche, Master Tsongkhapa, studied the teaching extensively and then practiced in meditation for a long time, and then he gave this teaching. He wrote down this text, and it was given to Tsagowambo Ngawan Thakpa, and so who was sent to the eastern part of Tibet to spread the teaching of the Buddha. And from there, he wrote a letter to Master Tsongkhapa to give some instruction. And therefore, so these lines, which are found in miscellaneous writings of Master Tsongkhapa, follow these words and practice it and practice them. And when I become a Buddha, and at some point, I will share the first nectar of my teaching with you. So, Tsagompa Ngawan Thakpa requested an instruction from Master Tsongkhapa, and Master Tsongkhapa gave this instruction. So, homage to the most venerable teachers can be linked to reliance on Guru. So the teaching of the Four Noble Truths was given for us to reach liberation. And therefore, the essential points of all the scriptures of the Conqueror, the path acclaimed by all excellent bodhisattvas shows Bodhisattva, and then the gateway to for the fortunate for one's aspiring liberation shows that of the correct view. So and then he says, I shall explain here these to the best of my ability. So the first line, the essential points of all in scriptures of the Conqueror, refers to renunciation. And then next verse shows the urging the disciples the receptive disciples to listen to the teaching. So not being attached to the joys of cycling existence, and who strive to make meaningful this leisure and opportunity, shows the Bodhisattva path, and who place their trust in the path that pleases the conquerors, shows that of the correct view as well. And so, O fortunate one, listen with an open heart. And then next one, without pure renunciation and so forth, shows the reason why we should develop renunciation. And then verse number 4 shows how to develop renunciation. And then with regard to this, in connection with this, I usually take the lines which are meant for developing bodhicitta. In the verse number 7 and verse number 8, I take these two verses in connection with renunciation. And so they're being swept away constantly by four powerful currents. They are bound tightly with fetters of karma and most difficult to escape. So the four currents are referred to, powerful currents referred to, the rivers referred to the birth, aging, sickness, and death. And it's not, this don't happen without any cause. The causes are the karmas, which are difficult to escape, and they are trapped inside. These karmas are in turn created through our grasping at true existence of itself, and they are enveloped from everywhere by thick mist of ignorance. And they take birth within cyclic existence that has no end, and so forth. And so here in this verse number 8, where it says, by reflecting on all your mothers, instead of saying all your mothers, by reflecting on the suffering nature of myself, I shall generate the supreme, I shall generate that of renunciation. So that's how I link this to renunciation. So we'll start with the question and answer now. Please ask your question.
Thank you, His Holiness. We have 6 questions for today. So we'd like to start from the first question. She is a retired teacher. She used to teach economics. So we have Karen Docton for your question.
Good morning, Your Holiness. Thank you for your precious teachings. Sometimes we try to help someone or some cause when they are in need. However, the action we have taken fails and may even result in hurting the person or cause. In this situation, is it better to try to help by taking a different approach, or is it just better to apologize and move on? Thank you.
So regarding that, when you have a sincere heart to help others, and do your best to help them, of course you'll face difficulties or oppositions or unfavorable conditions, but despite that, you should whip up your courage, and that includes the practice of joyous effort and patience. So in other words, the practice of the 6 perfections, combining them together, the perfection of generosity, morality, joyous effort, patience, and so forth. So, by developing love and compassion to others, and then going through these practice of generosity and so forth. So, of course, when you do these practices, if you do this in connection with your relatives and friends and so forth, there is some these practices may be slightly tinged with attachment. But when you do this practice in connection with your adversaries or enemies, it will not be tinged with attachment. So you should actually view them as your teacher, a spiritual teacher, and do your best to help them. So you also need to use your intelligence as well, seeing what is right and wrong. So though you may do your best to help the other person, either due to their karma or whatever the case may be, whatever the conditions may be, if it turns out to be harm rather than help, though you may be doing your best, but if it actually harms rather than helping them more, it's important to be neutral at that point.
Thank you.
Your Holiness, thank you very much for your answer. Next, we have questioner number 2, Selina Fong Sun Yi from Malaysia. She is an architect and is also currently offering service to the FPMT, Foundation for the Preservation of Malaysia, a Mahayana tradition, as a regional coordinator for these East and Southeast Asian centers.
Good morning, Your Holiness. My question is, in this world which is so filled with...
His Holiness was about to say something.
대연기 학원 시외 점린들 민주 남다 직다 대양 슉 잡으시 시들게 두범스 다 친대연기 가다에네
So the external sensual objects, of course, increases our attachment, desire. Today's world is focused mainly on material development and pleasure. So with these, are people happier? We can actually see this. So from the beginning of their schooling, from the KG, kindergarten, class 1, and so forth, up to university level, the students are more or less taught about material development. There may be some exceptions, but through this kind of education, is there more peace, good health, and peace of mind? But that's not the case. So, though there has been so much advancement in material development, people's desire and greed have increased, and therefore, because of this desire, when there is some opposition or some kind of a obstacle, they become angry. So these things, material developments, actually become conditions for increasing our negative emotions. So the teaching of the Buddha with regard to the 6 perfections, and then particularly that of the 6th one, the wisdom, is very important. So we need to use our intelligence to see the pros and cons of our actions. And the Buddha himself, in the teaching of the Buddha, it is said that you need to know the purpose of what you are doing and then engage in the actions. So certain things the Buddha had actually prohibited for some people, some disciples to do, whereas those are actually allowed for others. So these show looking at the pros and cons of the actions and the situations is important. And therefore, through the material development alone, what happens is because of these, we become more desirous and lustful and so forth, and therefore disturb our peace of mind. And therefore, material development alone cannot bring peace of mind, but they disturb our mind. So today, people are looking for peace of mind and actually look at the spiritual traditions, tradition like Buddhism, because they are not able to satisfy their desires. So it's important for us to cultivate love and compassion for all in order to have true happiness and peace of mind. So we develop anger and so forth with a narrow-mindedness. If you think more broadly about the benefit of others, so for example, the 7 billion people on this earth, and which very few people actually do. So all the 7 billion people are actually interdependent for our happiness, for our health, and so forth. But we are more or less short-sighted and narrow-minded, and therefore think of our own good. So we need to use our intelligence to and think of benefiting others more than oneself. And therefore, merely focusing on material development alone is short-sightedness. And also being selfish is opposite of the reality that you are in, which is that we are interdependent, and therefore all these problems arise because of selfishness and narrow-mindedness. Okay, start.
Your Holiness, we truly appreciate your insightful answer. It really sheds light to the question that many, many Buddhists are concerned with. To continue, I would like to bring forward questioner number 3, Oraphan Arsramat from Thailand. She is an acting teacher and a Vipassana practitioner.
Good morning, Your Holiness. There are many ways to practice meditation. Would you please advise which type of meditation is the most beneficial? Thank you.
So generally, meditation can be divided into analytical and focusing meditations.
shamatha slo는 조금째.
So shamatha has to do with focusing meditation and vipassana with analytical meditation.
조금 뒤에 개념을
So of course focusing meditation is important.
공의 시에 제순장에 또 조대야디 주 뒤체.
When you do this meditation, you are actually withdrawing your mind from getting distracted to the external objects through the five senses. So first you need to withdraw your mind to inside and then focus on the object that you have chosen. So what happens when you get distracted through the five senses and the stimuli, you should withdraw the mind to within yourself and then use, having withdrawn your mind and focus your mind on the object that you have chosen, then you need to do the analytical meditation, vipassana. So for the followers of Master Nagarjuna, the most important meditation is emptiness. Meditation on emptiness. So without letting the mind get distracted by the five objects, and having done that, having focused your mind inside, then you do analysis.
So
having developed single-pointed meditation, which is important, you need to start with this, and then not only focusing on the clear and awareness nature of the mind, but meditate on selflessness, and also these 3 points that the 3 principal aspects that we cover: renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view. These also should be used as your focus of your mind in the focusing meditation, and also analytical.
Your Holiness, we are very thankful for your advice. Moving on, we have questioner number 4, Mariana Kakalim from Indonesia. She is an entrepreneur.
Indonesia.
Good morning, Your Holiness, Tasi Delek. Thank you for the precious teaching. How can we not to be taken advantage of or being perceived to be weak while being compassionate in our workplace? Thank you.
So the environment that you are in, the society that you are in, makes a difference. Those who are more or less engrossed in desire and the pleasures of this life alone would find the people doing such practices to be weak. And so you may face difficulties due to this kind of circumstance. So the practice of love and compassion, you need to actually combine this practice with patience and contentment and use logic to practice generosity, morality, and so forth. And then use these practices to benefit others. And when others actually bully you or abuse you for doing your part, and if you actually let this go on, In the long term, what happens is those who are actually being bad, doing bad things to you, would be accruing their karmas for their own suffering in their past, in the future. So in the Bodhisattva practice, you need to do whatever is beneficial to others. But in practical terms, when you engage in practices benefiting others, others may take advantage of you and try to abuse you. And at such a time, without any anger, not motivated by anger, but motivated by compassion, you need to avert such negative actions or from others to try to overcome them, the actions. Next.
And now we have come to the second last questioner, who is an air ticket agent industry from Vietnam. I would like to bring forward Ms. Bùi Mai Chi.
Good morning, Your Holiness. I'm students and disciples from Tam Thok Rinpoche, a spiritual master from Phandalin, Vietnam. So today, on behalf of Phandalin, Vietnam, I would like to ask you a question. How important it is to rely on a guru with devotion to actualize the path to enlightenment. Thank you so much.
Reliance on a guru, in general, and for example, in the case of a school child, on the one hand, the teacher should be a well-qualified one, and then the teacher should be learned, and the students should be able to listen to the teacher. So even in general learning, the relationship between a teacher and the student is important. And when the teacher actually thinks of the long-term effect on the life of the student and takes this responsibility to help the child for his or her life, it's very important. Otherwise, if the teacher just thinks of passing time by taking his salary and without having any compassion and a sense of caring and responsibility towards the students, it's not helpful. And so, the teacher should have love and compassion towards the students and see the capacity of the students. So what is best for the students for the future, to become a specialist, what kind of subject they could actually pursue in the future and so forth, must be investigated by the teacher, and then give the instructions accordingly. And when it comes to the Dharma, we talk about a virtuous spiritual teacher, and then there are also evil teachers. So the best teacher for your spiritual path is called a spiritual virtuous friend. So for a student in general who is obedient to his or her teacher, and also the teacher being kind and helpful to the students, this relationship is very important. Whereas in the Dharma realm, the teacher must first be a well-qualified one, having these qualifications which are mentioned in the Sutra Alamkara, the 10 qualifications, such as being subdued and so forth. So Je Rinpoche says that for someone who wishes to discipline others, needs first to discipline themselves. And to do that, it doesn't help to just do any kind of practice they wish, but the practice should conform to the teaching of the Buddha. And therefore, the teacher must have the practice of morality, concentration, and wisdom taught in the Sutra Alamkara, and also must be compassionate. And so, the teacher should be someone who can lead the disciple through the complete path. So, not just giving some kind of a ritual or performing ritual and giving initiations, but so this statement Je Rinpoche makes, someone who wishes to tame others should first be tamed themselves. It's very significant. So what they teach to others must first be practiced by themselves, so that others, they can show example to the others. So without that, it's not going to be right. So even for a teacher in a school, he or she must have the right qualifications and not just have a big name. And so it is similarly in the case of a Dharma teacher. So with regards to the second part of the question, how important it is to rely on a guru. So I usually quote Abhisamaya Alamkara, these lines. So there are 10 instructions that are mentioned in Abhisamaya Alamkara that a teacher should give to the disciples. So when the teacher shows the path to the disciples, he or she, or they should show teach the two truths, the conventional and ultimate, not just being able to use the musical instruments, such as the bell. And then through the teaching of the two truths, they should lead the disciples to understand the Four Noble Truths, and then to understand, on the basis of that, the three jewels. And so, to journey onto the path to enlightenment, you need a teacher who is both learned and experienced through the study of the scriptures, as well as developing the experience through practice. So it's not enough, it doesn't help just to have some kind of experience which you may call experience of the Dharma by doing practice from here and there, but you need to actually, your practice should conform to the teaching of the Buddha. So in certain Lamrim texts, they go through these points of viewing the teacher to be Buddha, and the possibility to be able to do that. And briefly, whereas Je Rinpoche says that the Four Noble Truths should be used by the teacher to lead the disciples, because this is important in both the basic vehicle and the universal vehicle. And then Penchen Lobsang Chogyin's easy path, or the path of bliss, and Penchen Lobsang Yeshe's Penchen Lobsang Yeshe's swift path are very brief texts on Lamrim. They don't cover the topic on the reliance on Guru extensively. So Rinpoche, of course, does not go through the teaching on the Four Noble Truths in great detail, because he has already explained the Four Noble Truths in great detail in his commentary on Abhisamaya Alankara. But he says this is a very important teaching for both the vehicles. And so the teacher should lead the disciples through the process of teaching the two truths and so forth. In other words, the 10 instructions given in Abhisamaya Alamkara. So if you are able to listen to these teachings from the teacher and you develop experience within yourself, though you may not have the true, genuine experience in this life, you will be able to leave imprints in your mind, so that even if you were to die tomorrow, as Sakya Pandita says, even if someone were to die tomorrow, that person should still pursue education, because it will be like carrying forward a deposit into the next life that you can use. So even if you may not become experienced in the teaching, you should still pursue study, so that you leave the imprint for the next life. So this seems to be true, because for me, some topics which other scholars find very difficult to understand, I find them easy. So that shows my familiarity with these topics of study in the past lives. And so even if you may not develop any genuine experience, high experience of the teaching, you should be able to develop certain degree of renunciation and so forth to help yourself, so that it will help you in the next lives. Sometimes there are talks about reaching enlightenment within the 3-year, 3-month, and so forth retreat. And I usually say that this is like the Chinese communist propaganda. If you look at the life of Master Milarepa, he didn't become enlightened through 3-year, 3-month retreat, but he strove throughout his life in the Dharma practice. And then in the Gelug tradition, we have the Kedrup Norsang Gyatso, who was said to have become enlightened. He lived as a hermit for 40 years. And so, progressing along the paths and the grounds, it's not easy. So for myself, so having thought about bodhicitta, it's been over 50 years. And regarding emptiness, it's been over 60 years since I began thinking of them, or reflecting on them. So having done these reflections for over 50, 60 years, I'm still not near to enlightenment. So as we pray, may I never be separated from my precious Guru. But may I meet with the Guru throughout my life and then become enlightened and reach the Vajradhara state. And so that has to be the attitude, not just short-sighted. Thank you.
Your Holiness, we have 2 last questions. Our next questioner is from Macau, Wallace Tang.
Good morning, Your Holiness. My question is, it seems that this COVID-19 situation is endless and affecting not only our daily living, but also humanity communication. How can we get back to our normal lives? Thank you.
다디 지당자나 거라 나랑서
So generally speaking, as it is said in the Abhidhammakosha, there was a time when the universe was empty, and then there is an evolution process, the beginning of the universe, and then the abidance era, and then finally the destruction era of destruction. So there's this cycle. And when, with regard to the destruction, it is destroyed through weapons, diseases, and famine. So the different diseases, epidemics, and so forth. So with regard to the weapon, the destruction through weapon, the era of weapons, it seems this has gone for us because there have been a lot of killings through fightings and wars. And then because of these, diseases or the diseases happen, and then through that famine, and then it is also said that the world, the universe will be destroyed through fire, water, and wind. So as the global warming happens, increases, or becomes worse, some experts mentioned that in the next 2-3 decades, the world will, the global warming will be worse and worse. So it seems this may be an indication of the beginning of the world, the destruction through fire. So with regards to the coronavirus, the COVID pandemic, which many people are suffering today, so generally speaking, we are going through the process of the destruction of the world, of course. And there are people, the doctors and nurses and so forth in the medical field who are serving people, the patients. So I appreciate and admire all their efforts. And us who are practitioners of different religions, and particularly Buddhism and the Nalanda Tradition, I thought maybe it's important to recite the mantra of Aryatara, Om Tare Tutare Ture Swaha. So amongst the Chinese, there are you do recite. Sometimes Kuan Yin is referred to as Tara, and at other times Avalokiteshvara. So if you could recite Aryatara mantra, Om Tare Tutare Ture Swaha, I think it may be helpful to for this pandemic. So I do this practice on a daily basis. So I do pray for this pandemic to go away in India, for example, and recite the mantra, the Aryatara mantra, Om Taritu Tariture Soha. And those who are interested in the teaching of the Buddha, and particularly reciting mantras, if you could recite this mantra, Om Taritu Tariture Soha, as many times as you can, it will help. So the specialists, such as doctors and other scientists, you are putting effort in producing vaccines and so forth, which may be accomplished. But ultimately, when we actually face the destruction of the world or universe through fire, I mean, there's nothing we could do. And many of us talk about pure lands. So, having done your practice of the renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view to the best of your ability, and through the combining them with the practice of purification and accumulation of merit, and then eventually when the time comes for the world to be destroyed through fire and so forth, maybe we would be able to reach these pure lands, and we may be looking down on earth, which is getting destroyed through the fire and so forth. And so, in other words, thinking of doing practice over many lifetimes, life after life, is very, very significant and powerful. So we have this mind which is beginningless, and the mind must come from its compatible cause, substantial cause. It cannot come from some cause which is incompatible to give rise to it, and it cannot be without any cause. So regarding the causes, there are the two different substantial cause and the cooperative conditions. And so the mind will continue. So even at the time of the destruction of the world through fire and water and so forth, we would still be there as long as the mind is there. So I make this prayer: as long as space endures, as long as sentient beings remain, may I too abide to dispel the miseries of transmigrators. So this gives me the courage and determination, inner strength. The essence is to practice and to help others. So this is the essence of my practice. And then doing this practice of benefiting others, as long as space remains and as long as sentient beings remain, is a very powerful way of doing the practice. So there is every reason for me to have this courage and determination to work for others as long as space remains, and it practically helps.
Your Holiness,
Okay.
Today is Teacher's Day in India. We would like to wish you a very happy Teacher's Day. And we have our last questioner from Malaysia, Lim So Shu.
Good morning, Your Holiness. My question is, without strong
Hi, Ms. Lin, you can continue your question, please.
My question is, without strong and stable renunciation, is it possible to start developing even a little bit of bodhicitta? Thank you.
So these three, the renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view, cannot just happen in a day, all of a sudden, but we usually need to go through the process of developing the wisdom or understanding based on learning, study, understanding based on reflection, and understanding or insight based on meditation over a period of time. So you need to think about the impermanent nature of our life and so forth, and that is the starting with the practice of renunciation. And similarly, like yourself, other sentient beings do not want suffering, but they are overcome with suffering, and they want happiness, but they are devoid of happiness, and therefore you will also have this aspiration to help others. So when you find yourself in a position to help others to a certain degree, that's renunciation, the thought free to be, the determination to be free, also helps you to work for the benefit of others, and thereby thinking of aspiring for enlightenment for the benefit of others also would increase. So in other words, all the suffering and so forth are rooted in our ignorance, and so the development of renunciation is based on reason, to uproot this ignorance. And then bodhicitta also has there's good reason to practice it. And when you understand what correct view refers to, it refers to the insight into how things actually exist, which is the opposite of how ignorance. So Je Rinpoche so the understanding of emptiness helps to develop this the correct view. So for both renunciation and that of the practice of bodhicitta, the understanding of the correct view is important. So as the text itself, the three principal articles of the path says, these three must be dealt with in unison, so that they complement each other. So that's all for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Holiness, for today's teaching. We are looking forward to tomorrow. Tashi delay.